Happy Halloween! You're watching Team APS, and in today's video I've got some tricks and some treats for you guys. I'm going to discuss 5 obscure nifty tricks that you might not know about. This video isn't necessarily for the highly competitive player. Most of you guys should just look away, you probably already know this, but these are some cool sort of ruling exploits, ways you can dodge some of your opponent's cards, make them waste certain stuff, and have just some really cool interactions. So, got 5 of them, let's get started. Okay, so first, let's talk about dodging cards like Effect Veiler and Breakthrough Skill. Nobody really likes these cards. They negate your monster's effects, they can just chain to them, use normal summon your tour guide, it gets Veilered, you normal summon your Skull Crobat Joker, it gets Breakthrough Skilled. No fun. But you can actually get around these cards provided you have the proper tools. Remember that Effect Veiler and Breakthrough Skill both say that they negate the face-up monster's effect, but did you know, if the monster is no longer face-up on the field, the monster's effect can resolve like normal. What does this mean exactly? Well, let's have an example, right? So let's take Harpy Channeler in the Harpy deck. It's just, the level 4 monster. I'll have an image of it on the screen. You can discard a card and summon a Harpy monster from your deck or pet dragon, and this is really important. It advances your strategy, lets you start making Xyz plays. That's really cool. So you take your turn, you normal summon your Harpy Channeler, and you activate its effect, discarding your card as a cost. Your opponent chains Effect Veiler. Ugh. Well, all hope is not yet lost. Let's say that you have Icarus Attack set. So Icarus Attack lets you tribute a Wing Beast monster and destroy 2 cards in the field. Well, when your opponent activates Effect Veiler on your Harpy Channeler's effect, you can actually chain Icarus Attack, tribute off your Harpy Channeler, and then the chain resolves backwards, so Icarus Attack destroys 2 cards. And the thing is, Harpy Channeler's effect will resolve because it's no longer face up on the field. So this is extremely useful because remember, Breakthrough Skill and Veiler say the monster has to be face up on the field. So anything that you can chain to them that will get your monster away from being face up on the field, whether it's, Book of Moon to flip it face down, or in this example, Icarus Attack to tribute it, your monster will still be able to resolve. Now, it is important to note that there are a few monsters that say that they have to stay face up on the field to resolve their effect, and so for those specific ones, you really kind of don't have much of a choice. But that's actually kind of the exception to the rule. This works with most monsters. So in this example, using Icarus Attack will let you resolve your Channeler's effect like normal, and your opponent will have basically wasted their Breakthrough Skill or Effect Veiler. And just for one more example, let's take a slightly more recent card in the Dark Magician deck, Magician's Rod. So when it gets normal summoned, it searches a Dark Magician spell or trap from your deck to your hand. That's extremely useful as well. But let's say your opponent activates Breakthrough Skill, you're depressed and sad, but you're running that card Illusion Magic, which lets you tribute a spellcaster and add up to 2 Dark Magicians from your deck to grave your hand. Well, when your opponent activates Breakthrough Skill, you can actually chain your Illusion Magic and tribute off your Magician's Rod to search your Dark Magicians. Plus, Magician's Rod effect will resolve like normal because it's no longer face up in the field, so it can't be negated by Breakthrough Skill. This is just super useful. The applications of this go on and on. So many different decks have so many different ways that they can dodge these cards. But this is really important and something that I see a lot of new players don't know. So definitely get the hang of it and, don't just get beaten by Effect Veiler if you don't have to. Next is playing around cards like Night Beam, or more specifically cards that say destroy a spell or trap and say that you can't activate that card in response. So that's no fun. Normally you're used to, your opponent MSTing your cards, and if it's something chainable, then it's fine because you can chain your Jar of Greed, or chain your Compulsory Evacuation Device, or chain your MST to destroy one of their cards or something. So it floats and it's okay. But Night Beam is a bit of a thorn in your side because it says that the targeted card cannot be activated in response to Night Beam. And there are other similar cards like this, Fire Formation Gyoko, Mobius, the Mega Monarch. Well, if you read them carefully though, you'll notice that they say the targeted card can't be activated in response to Night Beam. But that doesn't mean you can't activate something else and then chain your targeted card to that. So let's say your opponent activates Night Beam on your set Jar of Greed. Normally you would want to just chain this and, draw your card and it'd be fine. But Night Beam says you can't do that. Well, let's say you also have a set MST. So when your opponent activates Night Beam and targets your set Jar of Greed, you can chain to their Night Beam your MST and target one of, their cards or any spell or trap in the field, and then, provided they have no other response, you can chain your Jar of Greed to your own MST, because it only says that you can't chain the targeted card to the activation of Night Beam. So So this might sound confusing, but it basically means that you're able to activate your card anyway, and in some cases effectively waste their Night Beam, waste their Gyoko, things like that. So this is a really nifty trick to keep in mind. The amount of cards that have this your opponent can't activate the targeted card response effect are fairly few and far in between, but when it comes up, it's always useful to know how to fight back. Next is destroying face-up continuous spells, traps, and field spells to stop their effects from resolving properly. So we all know that, MST doesn't normally negate, and we also know that that's because, if your opponent activates Pot of Desires and you chain MST to it, nothing happens. Effectively, your MST is wasted. Those cards don't have to be face-up in the field to resolve. But did you know that continuous spell and trap cards and field spells have to stay face up in the field for their effects to resolve? So the example I always like to use is Fire Formation Tinky. When it's activated, you can choose to add a level 4 or lower Beast Warrior type monster from your deck to your hand. Great for Fire Fists, great for lots of other decks too. But if your opponent chains MST to the activation of Tinky's effect, it won't actually search you a monster because continuous spells have to stay face up on the field to resolve. That's just a game mechanic. And this works with loads of other cards. Let's take, for example, the field spell Dragon Ravine. You activate its effect and discard your card, intending to search your Dragoonity monster or whatever. When you activate its effect and pitch your card as a cost, if your opponent chains Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twisters or something to it and destroys it, then you won't be able to search your Dragoonity or send your Dragon monster because it has to stay face up in the field to resolve. And one more example, just in case you're a bit confused still, is Call of the Haunted. When your opponent activates Call of the Haunted and targets their monster in the graveyard, you can chain MST or Twin Twisters or Dust Tornado or whatever to it, and because Call of the Haunted's no longer face up on the field, it can't resolve. So this is really, really important to know. Normally, people make the joke of MST doesn't negate. And in this case, it doesn't negate, but it can stop those effects. And this is something that I see a lot of players actually sort of missing. You gotta always remember that you can do this and you can really disrupt some opponent's plays. And in this era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where more and more field spells are doing the searching effect and stuff like that, more and more archetypes have some continuous spell that just searches, like say Raid Raptors, you can just use this to really get rid of cards easily and kind of neg your opponent if it involves doing some sort of a cost, like the Dragon Ravine example. So definitely worth keeping in mind. The fourth thing is end phase orders. So during the end phase, lots of different cards effects will stop, applying, or some sort of thing will have to happen in the end phase. During your end phase though, if you've got multiple effects like that that all have to sort of do something, you're able to pick the order of them in your end phase at least. So let's take the example of Card of Demise and Yosenju. This is a really popular one. Yosenju monsters return to your hand during the end phase, and Card of Demise, after you've activated it, during the end phase makes you discard your hand. Well, normally you would think, okay, well I wouldn't want to play Card of Demise in a Yosenju deck because my Yosenjus will return to my hand and then Card of Demise will make me discard them. But because it's your turn, you can actually pick the order that these card effects resolve in the end phase. So you can have your Card of Demise first make you discard your hand after you set your traps and everything like that, and then have your Yosenju monsters effects activate that return them to your hand. This is extremely useful, and it's why the Card of Demise strategy is so powerful with Yosenjus. But if you don't understand that though, there is another good example. Let's take Lightsworn monsters and Mind Control. So Lightsworn monsters during the end phase have to mill. As you know, if you're a Lightsworn player, you can choose the order that your Lightsworn monsters mill, but let's say that you use Mind Control and take control of your opponent's Michael the Lightsworn Arc, the Synchro monster. So, during the end phase, Michael has to mill 3 cards from the top of the owner's deck to the graveyard. If you want to, you can actually mill 3 cards from your opponent's Michael that you've got under your control from Mind Control. You can mill 3 cards from the top of your deck, and then have Mind Control give it back to your opponent. Or if you don't want to mill 3 cards, you can have Mind Control just give it to your opponent, and that's it. So this is extremely useful. There are a lot of situations where the order that things resolve in the end phase, if you have any control over it, you'll want to control these things because they can make a really big difference. So, there are numerous examples. I obviously can't name them all, but this is something that you'll want to look into because it comes in real handy when you've got just lots of effects happening all at the end of the turn and you want to have some sort of control over them. And last but not least, we're going to talk about ordering your chains to prevent your opponent from negating certain cards. The example I'm going to use is Mermails, and we're going to use them against Stardust Dragons. So let's assume that you've got 2 Atlantean monsters in your hand, Atlantean Heavy Infantry and Atlantean Marksman, and you've also got Megalo in your hand. Your opponent has a Stardust Dragon in the field. This is normally a really problematic card for Mermails to deal with. Well, you activate Megalo's effect, so you reveal it to your opponent, and then you discard your 2 water monsters as a cost. We're going to assume you're discarding your Heavy Infantry and your Marksman. So, your opponent says Megalo's effect is fine, so we're good there. When Megalo gets summoned, you've got 3 effects that have to activate. Your 2 Atlantean monsters, and then Megalo's search effect. If, that's a possibility if you want to do that. So, Atlantean effects are mandatory effects, so this all forms a chain, but because they're mandatory, they have to go on the chain first. And you've got 2 of them, so you get to pick the order. So let's say we make Heavy Infantry Chain Link 1, Marksman Chain Link 2, and then we make Megalo Chain Link 3. Well, your opponent is obviously going to want to use Stardust Dragon to stop, your Heavy Infantry or your Marksman, especially if, Heavy Infantry is like targeting the Stardust Dragon. But the thing is, Stardust Dragon actually can't activate its effect and stop your Atlanteans because the chain links, Infantry 1, Marksman 2, Megalo 3, prevent Stardust from activating because it can't chain itself to Megalo. Megalo is link 3, but Megalo doesn't destroy cards. So by using this strategy, you can actually prevent your opponent from ever even being able to use their Stardust Dragon. It's a bit of a confusing example, but a lot of other decks use this. This is extremely useful when your opponent has cards that can negate your own stuff and you want to play around them, and not all decks can really do this effectively, but any deck where you can make multiple card effects happen on the same chain, this is really something worth learning. So that's the video. Hope that was helpful. I know I'm not maybe the best at explaining these things, but if somebody in the comments wants to maybe better clarify what I said, that would be great. I'll also leave any articles that people suggest. I can put those in the description as well if it helps to make things more clear or more applicable. But yeah, those are 5 useful tidbits of knowledge that are sort of the finer points of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I see a lot of newer players really unaware of how to use, and I hope that that helps you guys sort of further your Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. So next month, November 2016, I'm going to be giving away an Invasion Vengeance box from TCGplayer, my sponsor. Check them out in the description, and this actually doesn't start the day this video goes up, but it starts the next day, so I figured I'd mention it, and I'll just go ahead and have the link to the giveaway in the description anyway, because you'll probably be watching this at some later date. Enter for a chance to win. It's going to be great, and if I can reach 50,000 subscribers before the end of November, I'm going to be giving away a second Invasion Vengeance box, so definitely help me out and share the channel with your friends. Social media and sponsor stuff is all down in the description as well, and leave other comments with useful nifty tips that might help a new player get a little bit better at Yu-Gi-Oh! And we can talk about it, make it a helpful public forum. That's going to be it, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.